Welcome to week 8. This is a video overview for our PowerPoint for this week regarding data literacy. Just wanted to provide a few talking points for this week's content and highlight a couple issues and kind of set up for some things for next week. So this week we're talking about data literacy, and the exciting part is data literacy is really emerging. And we've talked in the past, we've been reading the last couple weeks about data, and data now is at the forefront of everything in education. Yet there's a problem, is that we haven't quite agreed what or how is the best way to approach data or consume it or digest it or prepare for it. Even as we read Earl and Katz's text, they're presenting one model of approaching data. But data literacy itself is a new emerging construct in the field of education. And the fascinating part is we're really getting to view the birth of a new field. The data literacy is really becoming something of its own. And we're even seeing it in the field of business and marketing, that big data is really starting to drive a lot of practices, that everything's data-based and data consumed. But I wanted to talk about data literacy in the context of education today. So one thing I wanted to present is Mondenak was the article that you read, the 2013 article. But she has made an attempt to create a uniform definition of data literacy. And she went to the extent of using Gates Fund's foundation money to bring many experts of data literacy in. And here's the article that she presented from, she's out of West Ed. And the title here you can see is Navigating the Landscape of Data Literacy. It is complex. But she brought in, you can see here from this list, 20 to 30 different people from all different fields, and researchers as well as professional development consultants, CEOs, in an attempt to build a uniform definition of data literacy. And in education, we're really good at making lists. We're good at writing things and having bullet points and saying, it's number 1, 2, and 3, make up this idea. But the hard part is actually validating, constructing that, and making sure that it is established psychometrically. And that's kind of leading into next week, where we're going to talk about validity and reliability. But I wanted to share this with you because Mondenak really builds this premise of why we need to create a definition. And part of the policy, the process they used in this meeting was they had everyone that came write a definition. And I had a friend that attended, and he sent me this. And this is a collection of everyone's definition that was sent to Ellen Mondenak in an attempt to build a common definition. And you can see some are small and some are large. Some get into the very specifics of it, and some are very simple in nature. But I asked him kind of his feedback of how the process went, and he said he was very surprised that so many people came, all these great experts, and he was very excited to hear from them and learn from them as well. But he said everyone wanted to talk and no one wanted to listen, and by the end of it, they never really came up with a unified definition. And so I just wanted to present that kind of prior to going through this PowerPoint. But Ellen Mondenak really made an effort to try to build this, but didn't yield a good result. And I wanted to share some of the premise that she had. But there are models that exist out there for database decision making or data-driven decision making, but it's not quite the same as data literacy. Some models, they can provide insights into those skills and knowledge, but the field really lacks this larger framework that needs to be created on data literacy. I really like this quote. It says, at the State Department and college university levels, we are doing a lousy job of teaching data literacy. Too few states demand courses on testing and measurement. Too few colleges have those courses taught, when taught at all, by people who plausibly be described as psychometrically competent. We spend too much time on statistics of data and too little on how to make constructive use of the data and the ethics regarding data gathering and use. So in our field of education, we need to know what data literacy is and how educators become proficient with it. If it's really driving our field, we need to then have an understanding of what it is and how to use data. So there's this need for examples of data literacy out there in the field, because we're unsure of what it actually is. So we need to create this framework. We need to create this larger definition of what it is and what it means to be data literate. And there are some benefits to having this type of framework. A framework can be a platform really for training and building this human capacity around data use. And there's a number of other possible benefits Mandenek presents here. Having a definition of data literacy can help our field in a number of ways. First, it can help in professional development models. It can help in education preparation courses, which was the article you read in the 2013 article out of Educational Researcher. And it really can help the research. It can help projects. It can provide a place for measurement and shared research agendas. And that will then help funding research and developing projects with tools and resources, because we have a uniform framework that's being built. It can then help policymakers in their data-driven practices, hiring practices of educators. And my friend Tim Drake, who's at Vanderbilt, he's actually studying this as how educational leaders are using data in their hiring. And he's actually assessing and measuring that. And then it can also provide development tools and data systems in helping our teachers and our other educators use data effectively. So there's a number of benefits that this framework could provide for education. Mandenek really describes that as a data literacy as a continuum from a basic to an advanced proficiency. But the problem is we need to know what these levels are and what a minimum level looks like and what a proficiency level looks like. For example, how data literate educators need to be in order to be good teachers or administrators. How data literate should they be? The field also needs to understand what it means to be advanced. So if we know that bottom and the top, we can then begin to measure it and know what we want to shoot for, or essentially work towards. So Earl and Katz, their data literacy, or their becoming data literate, is presented more as a process. And they begin by blocking the canvas. They describe what do we want to know, imagining what it is that we want to address. And that's that research empirical process of first identifying our research question. And then we move on to designing our methodology. What data do we need? How will data help us answer that question? And then we begin to collect data. And there's a lot of steps to ensuring that the data are good, but how good are the data that we receive? There's issues of validity and reliability of that data. And then once we establish that it's good data, we can then begin to make these strokes and paint the picture of how do we make sense of it? How do we begin to interpret it and consume it and begin to paint that picture? And as that picture begins to emerge, we're making sense more of what does it all mean? What's the larger image that's starting to come from that painting? And so I really like this process because it is very practical in the sense of approaching data and consuming it. Mandenek and Gummer also present their definition of data literacy, and they break it into two components. The first side is the ability to use and understand data effectively. So that's the practical use and understanding side. And then the other side is the skills and knowledge base, this tacit understanding. And the skills they list are identifying, collecting, organizing, analyzing, summarizing, prioritizing, and then developing hypothesis, identifying problems, and then interpreting data. And then the action side of it, implement and then monitor a course of action after consuming that data. And that's how they define it. So why would data literacy be needed? Who needs it? And why do we talk about it? And really the emphasis in creating a larger framework and an understanding, or even this continuum of data literacy, is that it can benefit all components of education. And the research is starting to emerge that student data literacy is also a field, that our students now need to be able to consume data, their own data, and how they're doing, and monitoring their progress, and being able to understand what data is and how to interpret it. If they're essentially going to become adults later on and consume data, they need to learn as students. And then the obvious one, teacher data literacy, is how teachers are developing and processing and using data to inform their practice. And then same with leaders. and how leaders in a larger organizational perspective are utilizing data, consuming it. But then also stakeholders. We have parents and community members that need to understand what data is and how it informs their lives. Policymakers is obvious. If they're going to be creating policy, they need to be able to process data and understand, and knowing what level they are on this data literacy framework and this continuum. And then professional developers, they can help teach this and help others understand what data literacy is. And then the larger state educational agencies in providing mandates and ideas and understanding for the other districts they encompass. So data literacy is this field, is this framework that we need to build towards, and it's growing, and it's attempting to create a solid, valid framework of which we're going to probably see in the next couple of years that data literacy will become more established. But it's kind of nice and interesting to see this birth of this new field, even though data's been around and data use and data decision making, but understanding and data literacy itself is really starting to grow. So I wanted to provide that little bit for you this week. Hopefully you enjoy the reading. I'll attach these publications from Ellen Mandenack and how they created these definitions. But it is a difficult process, and it's kind of setting up for next week where we're going to talk about validity and reliability. And really, we're good at making lists, but how do we know that those are actually measuring the idea we're attempting to understand? Look forward to visiting you with next week. We'll be broadcast. Have a good week.